Uh, Thank you so much. Welcome, everyone. This is an event where we're going to talk about the feminist perspectives of care and caring economy, and we're going to discuss mainly the role of the international financial architecture. And we have amazing speakers here today. My name is Chantal Umuhoza. I'm a member of Women Major Group based in Rwanda. Happy to have you all here. We're going to have a few opening remarks from Anna Maria Alonso Giganto, who is the Council of the Human Rights and Gender Equality at the Permanent Mission of Spain to the United Nations. You have the floor.
Thank you very much, Chantal, for opening this event and for your warm welcome to us all. Dear member state representatives, dear UN representatives, and dear feminists, many feminists I see around. Welcome to this event. Spain, through our work within and beyond the United Nations, we have been working tirelessly to ensure that care and support are essential and yet overlooked aspect of our lives that keeps our societies and our economies alive and gets the attention, the recognition, and the resources it deserves at the United Nations and in our states alike. Today, we are happy to host this side event along with our partners to emphasize and provide concrete recommendations towards how the discussion on the reform of the international financial architecture should materialize in steps and systems that can help us realize care and support in our societies within care economies and care systems. I wish a very successful and fruitful conversation today, and thank you very much, all of you, for coming and be here with us today. Chantal.
Thank you so much. So the topic of discussion today, as I introduced, so we're talking about care and the caring economy, and we might ask ourselves how it is linked to the international financial architecture reform, but we might think about how we're here discussing about gender equality and the disparities and inequalities that persist, some structural, some systematic, some that are still in different ways and lives of women, some that are social cultural. The issue around care is central to gender equality. And financing of gender equality for realization of full gender equality and the discussion of financing that is being discussed here at CSW really is aligned to the reform of the international financial architecture. So how can we have care in its full meaning? And care is not just to think about caring about children, caring about people who need care. We're also talking about self-care, collective care, community care. How can we have societies that are peaceful, that are free from violence and conflicts? This is also part of the discussion on care. How can we have societies that have well-being and have their basic needs met? That is also part of care. So well-being is also care, and I want us to think about care in that broad sense of it, because we're not just taking care of people that need the caring needs that we usually talk about in a narrow sense, we're also talking about peaceful and the well-being of societies in general. So financing for all those needs to be met is really crucial. So to begin us off in the first segment, we're going to have two amazing speakers that I'm going to introduce now, who are going to discuss about the realities on ground, on care, what it looks like. So first, I want to introduce Lana Finikin, who is the Governing Council Vice Chair for Huairou Commission. Lana Louise Finikin is the founder, member of the Executive Direction of Sistren Theatre Collective in Jamaica that works at the grassroots with communities to address issues of violence, to deliver safer cities and spaces for women and girls. Lana is the founding member of grassroots organization and operating together in Sisterhood International, and currently the Vice Chair of the Huairou Commission's Governing Council. We also have here next to me a great friend that we've known for each other for years in the halls of UN CSW, Vicky Smallman. Is the National Director of Women's and Human Rights, Canadian Labour Congress. He's the Director of Women's and Human Rights for the Canadian Labour Congress, a long-time activist on women's and equality issues. Vicky spent a decade as a professional officer for the Canadian Association of University Teachers. She's also former chair of the Canadian Federation of Students in Ontario. She has researched and written about academic labor issues, activism, and women in Canada for a very long time. So I'm going to start off with Lana. Please, you have the floor. Tell us more about the realities on ground. Thank you.
Good evening, everybody. Thanks for being here. As you hear, I'm Lana Finikin. I'm from Jamaica, and I've been working with grassroots women since 1977. For us, as Huairou Commission, we have been working in caregiving work since 3 decades ago. For us, especially in the two pandemics, HIV, AIDS, and COVID, we have been working on the ground, organizing, mobilizing as caregivers, and ensuring that we work with the women in our communities and to ensure that they are the ones who are doing the work and getting the job done without paid, unpaid work, and picking up the slack where government have not been able to do the work, and they're not being compensated. But they carry on, they do what they have to do, and they ensure that they do the work. For us in Jamaica, in COVID, that was when the reality hits home. The women have to ensure that they take care of not just their household, but the community at large. And the other thing within COVID that hit them was that domestic violence reared its head. And also the pandemic as well as domestic violence they have to deal with. One of the things that they did as women on the ground, they ensure that they work not just by themselves with what their local stakeholders, the local government authorities, the police, the church, the school, the community that they have to work in. And when they were locked down, they find ways and means to communicate, to get medication, masks, and make them themselves and distribute to the women effectively on the ground. The other thing was how to address the domestic violence that have arise in the situation. Because what have happened, you have single homes, one room, and the men and kids and partners live in that space. When there was no lockdown, they would be out on the road, the men would be hustling, the kids would be at school, and they would be not in the same space. COVID pushed them in the space that they have to be there. And the man in that space was now bombarded with children asking for stuff that he would not have to deal with. It would be the mother or the partner in the home. And the women came together, they organized themselves with their counselor on the ground, with their church community, with the community as a group in Newland, which they call themselves Newland Community Security and Safety for Women and Girls. And they find ways to get to the women using code, using food baskets to get to the homes, to get the women out into makeshift spaces that some women have built in their own home. So some women turn their bedroom into a safe space and take the woman out of that space. Luckily, some of their husbands or partners understand the situation and allow them to use the space. They make up codes to ensure that in their WhatsApp group, they pass information to say, I'm in danger. So the stop sign, red, the green, and the amber. So the red is danger, so they know that when somebody puts something in that group, they are in danger. And they move and they move in units. So if the ones down by 45th Street are having issues, The one within 40 seconds will move to 45th. And the ones who are 34 having issues, they will move in a way that they can get to that person and get that person out onto that safe home that they have set up within the space. Also, we work with the Jamaica Household Workers Union. We work with Women Inc. who have 2 safe space homes. And one of the homes is for just a night or 2 days, and one is for 6 months to a year. And they will decide who goes to the 6 to a year and who is just qualified to stay into the 1 to 2 day. And we work with them and ensure that they get spaces, they get counseling, and ensure that they are okay before they go back or they decide to go somewhere else. One of the things that the women have done also is find ways of doing a soup kitchen that will enable them to feed the women, the elders, etc., within that space. Also, over the years, we have organized the women in a way that they know who they can trust, who to trust within their safe space, and who they can deal with at local authorities, which is a local municipal council, who they can call on, who they can call at the police station. They have those contact numbers. One of the other things as Huairou Commission that we did last year with UN Women and others, we had a Grassroots Women Care Summit in Mexico. And we have some call to action that we had done. And one of the things that is that we leave that 1 year call to action with some things that, one is that we agree that grassroots-led enumeration of the economic value of our caregiving work, campaign for flexible direct funding for our local caregivers groups to contradict working for free and patterns, and to forging partnership with donors, policymakers, and researchers to ensure caregivers are publicly respected, resourced as pillars of gender-just caring economy by government and private sector leaders. And we are calling on everybody today to work as partners within this space, work as partners who are working on caregiving, and to ensure that as care workers and caregivers and unpaid work, we recognize these women on the ground, the grassroots women, the domestic workers, and the ones who are out there. I was speaking to Shirley a while ago that we have women working with the Chinese, working in grocery shops, supermarket, working in spaces that they don't have a voice. We have to be the voice for them. We have to ensure that we reach out and hold our government accountable so that we can get social intervention for these women and social impact for them to ensure that they live safe and they are livable and get sure that they have a proper wage at the end of the day.
Thank you so much, Lana. And that was really powerful. Thank you so much. We learned again and reminded about the disproportionality of care work, the increase and rise of GBV, including during crises like the pandemic, and the work that is there on ground, and call for partnership to really recognize and address care work. So Vicky, as you speak in your strictly 5 minutes, I hope I hope you also touch on the International Day of Care as part of the campaign. Tell us more about this and the significance of this campaign. Yeah, over to you.
Great, yeah. So global unions, I speak as a part of the Canadian Labour Congress, but obviously we are here at the UN with a delegation of trade unionists from different sectors from across the globe, including domestic workers. Very happy to be talking about this issue, which has really become a central priority for trade unions, and especially for trade union women. And we made the issue of care work and care jobs a priority starting in 2018 when the ILO released their really important report on care work and care jobs. The Global Union Federations had a meeting and invited some other partners and began to work on a coordinated strategy to call for investments and decent work in the care economy. And we started with the first ever Global Union Day of Action on care, and arbitrarily decided that October 29th was going to be it. But we never could have imagined that a few short years later, we would be facing a global pandemic that would have disproportionate and devastating impacts on women workers and caregivers, and that would shine a bright light on just how much our economies and our societies depend on care work. Care work, both paid and unpaid, is part of our social fabric. The work of caring for others supports individuals, families, communities, and allows our society and our economy to function. But unfortunately, and even after the pandemic, care work is not well understood, and it is taken for granted. Often in Canada, when you say care work, people go automatically to healthcare. But it also includes social and education services, including early learning and childcare, domestic work, personal care for seniors and people living with disabilities, social work and mental health services, basically all the things the person needs in order to go to school, to work, and to live a healthy and dignified life. And in Canada, 1 in 5 paid workers in Canada works in a care sector, 1 in 5. That there is not, and that's just the formal economy, right? That does not count domestic workers, migrant live-in caregivers. It does not count informal workers at all, because unfortunately we don't have a very good way of measuring that work in Canada right now. When it comes to the paid labor market and gender inequality, the feminization of occupations, such as nursing, personal support, childcare, have led to these jobs being undervalued and underpaid. Obviously, if people expect it to be free, then it's okay to pay paid workers less, right? And this is exacerbated by racism and systemic discrimination against Black, racialized, immigrant, and migrant women who are overrepresented and undervalued in care work. So even when there's a variety of different types of professions, you might have highly professionalized jobs like nursing, but in the lowest paid, lowest quality jobs, that's where you get more racialized people, more Black people, more new Canadians and migrants. Yet care work is the foundation of the economy. I mean, it really is a public policy cognitive dissonance, right? Because it's the work that allows all other work to happen, and it enhances our quality of life. And with a global pandemic, increasing conflict, natural disasters, a changing climate, a cost of living crisis, an aging population, growing demand for care services, we still cannot find ourselves with serious conversations and investments to address what we really are in the middle of. We are really in the middle of a care crisis, right? When COVID, and if left unaddressed, the costs will only continue to grow, and so will the challenges in access to quality care. And you could only really address it if you address the decent work deficits in the sector. When COVID-19 hit, all of the barriers to women's economic justice were exposed, and they were made worse. Women were hit hard. Women who already faced social and economic barriers, including women living with disabilities, Black and Indigenous women, women of color, migrant and immigrant women, and lone parents, experienced even worse economic and health impacts. And in Canada, women's participation in the labor force fell from a historic high to its lowest level in 30 years. But the other thing that happened in Canada was that our patchwork care systems buckled and broke under the weight and strain of the pandemic. We saw firsthand the disastrous impacts of decades of austerity and privatization, especially in long-term care, where many, many elderly people and care workers died. It was devastating. And over the last few years, care systems have continued to suffer. Many workers left their jobs during the pandemic, citing burnout, concerns over violence and health and safety, low wages and poor working conditions, precarity, and the ability to meet their own care needs. If you cannot find care on the salary that you're getting, if it's cheaper to stay home than go to work, then you have a problem with your system, right? Healthcare, long-term care, community and social services, childcare, education, every care sector is experiencing a workforce crisis. And at the root of this are decent work deficits and lack of access to care for workers' own families. And this, I know, is not unique to Canada. Across the globe, workers are demanding that our governments make fixing our care systems a priority. People have, and they should have, but they have a right to the care they need, and the people who provide care should be, whether it's paid or unpaid, visible, valued, and supported. And the connection between the human rights of care recipients and decent work for care workers is essential. Care is a priority for trade unionists around the world. Right now, we're all getting ready to discuss this at the International Labor Conference in June, and we are really hoping that we can try and enshrine some of the principles that the ILO has written about and that we've been talking about, and really reinforce the right to care and the need for truly public investment and leadership in comprehensive and integrated care strategies with decent work for care workers at the heart. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And we're going to, that was really, really powerful in terms of also reminding everyone that we all need care, we all depend on care, whether it's paid or not paid, but also to unpack the feminization of care work, how it's undervalued, underpaid, and mostly how it's also exacerbated by other systems of oppression that we have also discussed, including racism and others in different contexts, and how then solutions to care and caring economy needs to also unpack those other systems that are there that discriminate and put women and people that provide care in different categories of discriminations. So we're going to move to a different category, and this we're going to talk about the significance of the normative evolution of the international human rights standards, in particular the Human Rights Council, the General Assembly Resolution on Care, and support systems. So we're going to have Mr. Umuhoza, the Chief Equality Development and Rule of Law Section at the OHCHR New York office. So Mr. Hada, you're currently at the OHCHR's thematic engagement in New York on equality and non-discrimination, on sustainable and the rule of law, to mainstream human rights in interagency and intergovernmental discussion at the UN headquarters. We want to hear from you about how the significance of these standards are, how it has been, and how it can lead to the discussion that we're having on the reform of the international financial architecture. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We just heard very powerful presentations on the reality of women as caregivers or care receivers. And that reality should really remind us of the hard lessons learned from the COVID pandemic, that how the deficiencies in the current care and support systems made us all vulnerable, undermined many people's rights, and hindered opportunities for sustainable development. So 4 years after the COVID outbreak, we really should be shifting from the old system that relied on informal, unpaid care, mostly performed by women, to new rights-based systems that are sustainable and comprehensive and leave no one behind. So I was asked to talk about normative evolution, and since long before COVID, there have been several streams of discussions under different international, regional human rights mechanisms that builds up a wealth of international human rights and labor standards to guide the development of care and support systems. One of them is looking at the rights of women as caregivers under the CEDAW Convention. Lana and Vicky were talking about the unequal share of unpaid care and support work has eroded the women's and girls' enjoyments of human rights and their participation in the formal economy. And the rights advocates have been calling for the recognition, reduction, redistribution of unpaid care work, rewarding paid care work, and ensuring the representation of their voices in the decision-making as a key lever for eliminating gender equality. Another strand of discussion, it comes from the CRPD, the rights of persons with disabilities to receive support with dignity and autonomy that enable their life in community rather than as passive recipients without choices. Another strand comes from the Convention on the Rights of the Child, which protects the rights of the child, both as receivers and givers of care and support, and respect their agency by recognizing their right to be heard. And all of these conventions and ILO conventions and recommendations, they all emphasize the importance of dignity, autonomy, and equal participation of rights holders in a society and their participation in decision making. So there is a good convergence of these different strands that recognize the interlinkages between the rights of caregivers and the rights of receivers of care and support. At the regional level, too, there have been many significant developments. In Latin America and the Caribbean, the states adopted the Buenos Aires Commitment that recognized care as a right to provide and receive care and to exercise self-care, and also as a responsibility that must be shared by people and the society. In Europe, too, the European Care Strategy for Care and Givers and Care Receivers has been developed, offering guidance for comprehensive care services. And in the African region, the Protocol to African Charter for Human and People Rights on the rights of older persons in Africa has provisions on care and support. And here at the UN, most recently, there have been 3 resolutions on care and support adopted by the GA, the Human Rights Council, and ECOSOC, spearheaded by Spain and a couple of other supporters. And these have all elevated the urgency of addressing the issues from human rights and more comprehensive perspectives. And they call for establishment of human rights-based care and support systems that are gender, disability, and age responsive, and investment in the care economy. So these resolutions can facilitate a truly comprehensive reform of care and support systems, addressing all dimensions of care and support. Now, before concluding, I'd just like to make 3 points here about the link with the care economy. The first, investing in care and support system is essential. The international human rights standards also provide guidance to states to mobilize maximum available resources for the realization of such rights. But what kind of systems are we investing in? We need to make sure that these are rights-based models, and we're not investing in the old model of care that creates more dependency and widens gender inequality. Second, as Vicky was saying, we need to quantify and recognize the value of unpaid informal care. And for the paid care workers, their working conditions and labor rights need to be protected. And the companies and businesses in the care sector need to uphold their human rights responsibilities. In other words, the care economy needs to be rights-based. The third and my final point is that when we talk about care economy, sometimes we also hear how this is a growing sector, great business opportunities, and important for the economic growth. But we also need to turn this around and rather than looking at how care and support will contribute to economic growth, certainly that is the case, but also how can the current economic system and the policies, how can they be shifted to work for the people providing and receiving care and support and for gender equality and the human rights. So, for example, when investment in public services are cut due to austerity measures or left to market mechanisms, women and girls, again, forced to fill in the gap with increased unpaid care work, and people who need care and support are isolated and their autonomy compromised. So human rights should be at the center of economic policy making rather than the other way around. So this is what we call a human rights economy that the High Commissioner and Office is advocating, which can be a key lever for tackling gender inequalities and putting the SDGs back on track. And this is why the calls for the reform of the IFA, international financial institutions, and the global debt are so important, because this is a part of the problems that of the current economic system. I conclude with the words of the UN Secretary General. the international financial architecture should be structured to proactively support the implementation of the SDGs and the realization of human rights. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. My key highlights is that any solution that we bring to the table in terms of care and the caring economy needs to be rights-based. And the role of the international financial architecture, the reforms are really crucial because that's where the formation and the structure and the status of the current economies are, and that's where the inequalities reside and other issues that we're talking about. We are slowly moving to a different segment that is going to give us other concrete analysis and also very good recommendations in terms of what we need to do. And in this segment, I have two speakers that are going to talk about what needs to change. And again, linking with the international financial architecture, we're going to hear from Memory Kachambwa, who is the executive director of Femnet. Memory is an intersection of feminists, a women's rights activist for over 18 years, with experience working on issues on gender equality and development, human rights in Africa and globally. As a dynamic Pan-African feminist through leadership and strategic Memory is passionate about making difference in the lives of women and girls using diverse approaches grounded in social justice, feminism, and gender equality and analysis and practice. We're also going to hear from Emanuela Pozan, who is a senior gender specialist at ILO. Ms. Pozan has over 20 years of experience working in the Middle East, Africa, and Asia on gender equality and non-discrimination in the world of work. Her career included serving as the Italian Minister of Foreign Affairs, NGOs, at UNFP as well, and ILO. She is now working on the Gender Equality and Diversity Inclusion branch at the ILO headquarters in the capacity as the Senior Gender Equality and Non-Discrimination Specialist. She coordinates the portfolio that include on initiatives on the area of access to work for women, care economy, pay equity, and violence and harassment in the world of work. I'm going to start with giving Memory 5 minutes to tell us about what needs to change.
Thank you so much, Chantal. I think Rio had already started addressing what needs to change, especially within the international financial architecture. I think the first is really the first R. When you talk about the K economy, the recognition that the current international financial architecture is a market-based, profit-making, capitalist, extractive system. So to change that is going to require more because it's not based on human rights. It's not based on honoring sustainable development, honoring the planet. But I think under that that recognition is also the recognition with the experience from COVID that it has to change. So I think it's an opportunity for infusing the work that feminist activists, labor movements have been putting around the K economy. It's not new. I think this has been there, and I think now it's getting a lot of precedence. So for me, that's the first for international financial institution to really recognize that it is part of an economy. So changing that orthodox model and also infusing it into the way economists, because we're speaking to economists who only know a particular model of how the economy should be structured. So I think that is very important. The second one is really around the looking at issues around debt. And I think throughout CSW, we've been hearing statistics that for every $1 of money borrowed, $13 is actually replaced. I think I heard that statistics yesterday. I hope it's correct. But I think especially if we look at the African context where the majority of the countries are in debt distress, most of the repayments which should be actually feeding into the K economy are going towards repayment of debt. Some of this debt, which is really debt which we call illegal, colonial debt. I know DRC, for example, the Belgium, when it was under the colonized, the Belgium actually borrowed money for importing goods from Europe, and that debt, has accumulated, but for a lot of other countries within the global south. And when you find countries borrowing, most of the money they are borrowing is to support their budget, their actually budget, because the fiscus is very small. So within that, for supporting social services, supporting the care economy sectors of education becomes really something which is really nowhere. So there's no money even to support that care economy. So I think that also needs to change in terms of how international financial institutions, how they are looking at issues around debt, and really counseling, restructuring should also be centered around care. And we've also seen, I think, World Bank, they have also started doing a program around on child care. But I think it's to say the care economy is beyond just child care. I mean, there's so much reform, so much investment. And for me, a critical thing that actually needs to change is supporting women's rights organizations and movements who have been pushing on care, who have been doing the care, who have been doing the research on care, who are actually holding the care economy. So if we are to ask who is holding the care economy, it's the women's rights movements, organizations, institutes. They are the ones who are providing everything from child development. So they are substituting that. But that does not feature when the global economics are discussing issues around care. So I think it's important to also for IFIs to look and to broaden and to also have partnership with women's rights organizations. I know my time is up, but let me just say 3 things. I think the tech system, because when we're talking about an international financial system, the tech system is really important and is heavily entrenched currently in a very neoliberal model. So I think we've seen the global South countries pushing for tax reform and the UN tax convention. So I think that is also important in terms of what actually needs to change. Looking at illicit financial flows, how we can address and curb illicit financial flows, but also start challenging how the resources should also go into investing within the care economy. Also looking at issues that have to do with, I talked about debt relief, but also having sustainable support in terms of the designing fiscal policies and institutions. So when you look at how do we ensure that when we talk about our budget systems, they are also incorporating, supporting care economy as well. And the issue that Vicky talked about, austerity measures, privatization, when public services are privatized, it means that they become expensive and less affordable and reachable. So it's also important to address that in terms of shifting the global international financial institutes. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Really brings the center some of the key issues that are also being negotiated now at CSW in terms of the macroeconomic issues and how financing for gender equality needs to also look at the global, but also the micro levels, so definitely at all different levels. So, Manuela, I want to get to you, and hopefully we do 5 minutes because we still have a last segment, and we want to really also hear from the audience about different questions, but also inputs to this discussion. So, over to you.
Thank you very much. And of course, talking after memory is never easy. But no, just to say that for me, besides the technical arguments that we can bring here, what I would like to share with you is that at my first CSW, that was more than 7 years ago, I remember that the conversation on the care economy was very much about work and life balance. Looking at working time and flexible arrangements, after 7 years, I think we're really connecting the dots. Yeah. I mean, we are here at a table, we are discussing how to center care in that discussions and in social protection discussions, in human rights-based approach, labor rights approach. I mean, I think we should really be proud of the fact that we are connecting the dots and we are all coming, towards recognizing that that care is a public good, right? And a lot has been said already of the importance of care and the connection that the care economy has in our lives, right? We're all part of the care economy in a way or in another. We all contribute to it. And this fil rouge that is very much in the room and at CSW finally of unpaid care work and paid care work. Finally, we're all coming together on this. And I think this is beautiful, it is powerful, and we really need to keep this momentum. Now, from my side, I had prepared lots of data, but I think you all know this data. However, I would like to say that we should also be proud of the fact that there is a growing recognition that investing in creating a solid, gender-responsive, disability-inclusive national care and support systems pays off. And that they are key for resilient, performant, and more equal societies and economies. And it is not by chance that the ILO has put investing in the care economy is one of those transformative measures towards a gender equality agenda, including in the world of work. Because investing in the care economy is really a way to look at a set of policies, comprehensive policies, that if well designed, they can really take us to a higher level, socially and economically. I'm talking of macroeconomic policies. My colleagues have already mentioned those, social protection policies, labor protection policies, migration, and all of this, they need to come together, rights-based, labor rights-based, and they constitute what we call the 5 R's framework, which are very essential to recognize, reduce, redistribute unpaid care work, but also reward care workers and represent care workers. So when we talk about investing in the care economy, we do need to make a business case, because unfortunately, to sit at the table and making the case for investing in the care economy as a transformative measure to address inequality as well, to address poverty, which is the topic of the CSW, we do need to look at the advantages. And as a matter of fact, investing in the care economy, first of all, as ILO, we have lots of data where we can see the returns in terms of job creations, and employment is a very important aspect of the economies and societies to function, to thrive, to be performant. But at the same time, if we look, for instance, at the child care policies and child care gaps that we currently have, both in policies and services, we can say that investing in childcare for $1 that is invested in closing the childcare policy gap, there could be an average increase of 3.76, almost $4 in gross GDP. Now, this data can be applied to all the continents, and all continents would actually have an important returns in GDP, in gross domestic product. So such investments, as I said before, they also have the potential to generate more than 300 million jobs. And of course, it's true, there is no fiscal space. We have had crisis after crisis, but at the same time, we do need to recognize that the care economy is an important segment of the overall economy, and we need to value it more. We need to be able to show how important this economy is. But at the same time, as we said, the investments in the care economy require different sources of funding. They can come from domestic public resources, even though we know fiscal space are restricted, but they can also come from domestic and international private finance, from international development cooperation. All of this requires restructuring. What I wanted to focus on, and it will be my last point, is actually the importance of financing social protection benefits and care policies. And in particular, I would like to look at maternity benefits. As you know, around the world, there are more than 649 million women that do not have any sort of maternity protection. And this is painful. It's an ugly feature of the world of work. And maternity benefits, for example, are provided through a variety of schemes, including contributory, non-contributory schemes, and also employer liability. Now, Convention 183, which is the Maternity Protection Convention, is actually a convention that is poorly ratified, and yet every country would say that they need to provide support to mothers and to the newborns. But it is very poorly ratified as a convention, and it is a convention that has it is a convention that provides transformative measures to support gender equality. So to conclude, I fully support what colleagues have said, and I really think that we should be proud that we're moving this discussion, but certainly, to reform the financing system that supports gender equality, that is transformative, that pushes for a care economy that is equal, that is vibrant, and everything. We do need the feminist groups. We do need those activists that are actually the trade unions and all those that can gather power, because we really have to change this structure. As Vicky said, the International Labour Organization will have what we call a general discussion in June. It will be an opportunity to look into the complexities of the care economy, of decent work and the care economy. So stay tuned, because hopefully we will have some ways to elevate the discourse on this important topic. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Learning about the different developments and also plans in place in line with this discussion. So in our last segment, given that we don't have so much time left, but we have the last segment where we're going to talk about looking forward, what do we do after here. We're going to have very brief remarks from speakers from UN Women, but also from the Executive Committee of the International Domestic Workers Federation. We have here with us Sonia George, who is the National Vice President of the committee, a National Union of Informal Workers with 2.5 million membership. She comes from a long background of organizing, which started with the student movement as it inspired her to join the struggle of the marginalized communities. We're also going to first hear from Dr. Jemima Njuki, the Chief Economic Empowerment at the UN Women. Dr. Jemima is the Chief Economic Empowerment Section at the UN Women, globally recognized leader in gender equality and women's empowerment. She manages UN Women's work on jobs and entrepreneurship, transforming care systems, gender-responsive climate action, macroeconomics, and financing for gender equality. She has held key positions at organizations such as the International Development Research Center, CARE, USA, and the International Livestock Research Institute. We want to hear from you, Dr. Jemima, in terms of what do we do from here, especially after we have the agreed conclusion, hopefully that we have language that also talks about the issues we're talking about here. What do we do in terms of the plans that are there, in terms of the reforming of the international financial architecture? How do we support member states to actually implement what we already have, including in the different human rights standards that we have been shared? Thank you.
Thank you very much, and it's such a pleasure to be here. That's a huge ask in terms of where do we go from here. But I want to start with saying that the CSW is actually very strategic. The fact that we are having a conversation on financing for gender equality, financing for poverty eradication, and financing to strengthen institutions, including local feminist institutions. And the reason why it is so strategic is that our expectation is that the agreed conclusions from this CSW actually feed directly into the financing for development forum that's happening in April of 2025. I always say at CSW, we get a lot of ministries of gender in New York. We get a lot of feminist organizations in New York. In a lot of ways, we are preaching to the converted. But we want to then take this conversation to the unconverted, those that are sitting at the Financing for Development Summit, and those that will be sitting at the UN General Assembly 79 in September of next year, when we also have the Summit of the Future. Because that Summit of the Future is going to define what our future development agenda looks like. And so our hope is that the conversations we have at this CSW actually inform those three very important processes that are happening next year. But to make that happen, it's going to take all of us to make sure that we elevate that conversation. The second thing that's a very immediate way forward is, as you know, CSW69 next year in 2025 is going to be our Beijing Plus 30. Now, ahead of CSW69, we are going to have a lot of national consultations, a lot of regional dialogues that are going to lead up to the Beijing Plus 30. And so we want to take this CSW and the intervening period between now and CSW69 to actually level up this conversation on financing for gender equality and financing for care to be a central part of that agenda. So part of our work, and I'm saying our work here because this is collective work with all of you, with feminist organizations, with labor unions, with our sister multilateral agencies, is to start framing this agenda in ways that it enters into these global conversations that are going to be happening, and to really support our government to better link the socio-economic and environmental policies that they will be discussing into this care agenda. One of the things we really want to see is discussions with our ministers of finance, with our ministers of planning, to get this financing for gender equality as part of national development planning and not just the purview of gender ministries. Part of the work that we have been doing with ILO is we have continued to advocate for public investments in comprehensive systems that include accessible, affordable, and quality care services. So this framing of care as a public good is going to be so important in these coming multilateral systems. I want to touch quickly on the resolutions and that were adopted last year and earlier this year. I think as Mr. Harder has said, if you had asked us 5 years ago, and I think Emanuela has pointed to this as well, if you had asked 5 years ago, if someone had said that by, March of 2024, that we will be having 3 resolutions across our most important multilateral spaces that just focus on care, I guess none of us would have believed it, right? But we now have, we joined the labor movements, we joined feminist organizations, the General Assembly recognizing an International Day of Care and Support, and really joining up our efforts there, but also in the Human Rights Council. And earlier in February, we saw ECOSOC also pass a resolution recognizing care as central to social and economic development. We recognize that the fact that we have reached at this point is partly due to the years of collective activism of women's organization. I think let's be clear, yeah. And the feminist movement and the labor unions, disability rights and children's rights organization. We really want to make sure that we recognize that where we are now is as a result of all of you. Now, what I'm counting on you, and especially those of you here who are part of the government delegations here, there's language that we are speaking in these side events. Please make sure that this language ends up in the agreed conclusions that we will have for CSW. And finally, just 2 points on the reforms of the international financial architecture. I think it has been said, we have a system that doesn't work. It is not working for women and girls. It is not working for the planet. I actually don't think it is working for a lot of us, other than a few of those I don't know what to call them, but you know what I mean. It's working for the few at the expense of the majority. And so what we are really calling for is a major rethink so that we are integrating the care economy and moving beyond GDP. There's a big conversation within the UN system on moving beyond GDP as the main measure of well-being. We are advocating for gender-responsive macroeconomic policies, redistributive economic policies, and progressive taxation as part of the discussions going on the tax, on an international tax reform. I think very aligned to our common agenda, we will continue to support member states on this across these multilateral spaces that are coming up, and especially next year is a big thing. It's a big deal, and sometimes our governments do look up to these international norms and standards that we set here to actually inform their own macro policies. So it is really important that we continue to work together as the multilateral system to ensure that we can do that and that we place care on the agenda, both of financing, but also of the summit of the future.
Thank you so much. There's lots to look forward to in terms of the next steps. And last but not least, of course, in this section, we have Sonia, George. And Sonia, we also know that there's going to be the Civil Society Conference, UN Conference in Nairobi in May, where there's also going to be multiple consultations with the civil society on the Summit of the Future. We want to hear from you any remarks, any things that you want to say in the few minutes that we want to continue doing in terms of this discussion. Over to you.
Thank you. And thank you for this opportunity, being part of this very interesting discussion that is carrying on here. I don't want to repeat what has been discussed within the co-panelists. I just would like to mention a few things, and as I'm representing two huge organizations in the world, like International Domestic Workers Forum movement, which is representing domestic workers all over the world with 68 countries and 88 affiliates, and also SEWA, one of the biggest trade union of women in the informal sectors with more than 3 million members. It is important for us to stress certain things when it comes to discussions on care and care economy. And I think while discussing about care, all the issues that we have been discussing, especially from the perspective of care, givers, I think I think we have to focus on increasing informality that the caregivers, like the real workers, are facing in this world. So increasing demands of care means increasing informality all over the world. That is one of the situations that we are facing. So I think one of our first targets should be to how do we tackle informality. That's how do we work towards formalization. That is something that we have to work very importantly in the discussions and policies on care, and that is where we have to think about different situations that we think. First of all, I think the very thin line between the paid and unpaid care that we have been talking about, it has reached to a kind of de-skilling of the care, the real caregivers, because the society has this notion of care is an extension of domestic work, care is an extension of household work that doesn't need like much skilling in that sense. So we argue for skilling and investment in skills in terms of caregivers and care providers, and also in terms of people who really need care, who receive care, also have to experience that skills that people provide care in the society is needed. So public skilling, experiences of care, and investment in skilling in the care economy is very essential for us in that proportion. And the next one, as Emmanuel is also saying, how do we look at social protection in the context of care? That is very important. Universal social protection is very, very easy word to talk about or to deliberate on. But when it really comes to the question of formalization and social protection, investment in care is again a big step towards investment in social protection with decent social protection for people who are in care, who are the caregivers, and who really need care. And here I think it is important for us to discuss about the collectivization of care. That is very important. Means when we talk about collectivization of movements of different, like feminist, labor, human rights, and all, how this leads to collectivization of care. That is very important for us to discuss in that sense. Means it includes skills, it includes social protection, it includes a collective force that requires skills, investment in infrastructure that we were talking about, in relation to skilling. That is very important. Means it's not only the question of providing care, but it is how do we provide care. We have so many sisters representing people with different abilities, people from other different, like child care, reproductive health care, old age care, different kinds of care services are needed, and that is the need of the hour. But how do we require infrastructure at different levels, and access to infrastructure for caregivers and care receivers? That is very important, and investing in such infrastructure makes, I think, the caregivers very strong in this role of entering into the care economy. And the next thing that I would like to point out is on when we're talking about self-help groups and the kind of debts that the countries or the international financial institutions have been putting on the micro-level activities. I think it is important for us to think and relate it to the governance process, the good governance process that is happening. Because when we talk about creating 300 million jobs, we are thinking about the good governance process is imposing debts on women who are really the grassroots level women. It is like thrift and credit rather than investing in livelihood or investing in supportive system that can build employment at different levels. So from thrift and credit, from the savings model, how do we go, or how do we invest to creating livelihood, the so-called 300 million livelihoods that are going to be created in the area of care? How are we really going to shift the international financial institutions think about their policy towards investing in livelihoods in terms of access to work and access to social protection and access to care rather than access to thrift and credit? So that could be the macro economic dynamics that we have to think of while we really think about the care systems. And finally, the thing is that when we really come into this question of unpaid and paid care, some of the terminologies have come which really create a vacuum amongst the workers. Means, for example, caregivers are voluntary workers. So where is the sense of voluntarism coming in care? No, of course, we agree there is a voluntary element, but when it comes to women or the gender relations, that is where voluntarism is defined. So, and it is very problematic. Mm-hmm. So we are not voluntary workers. We are workers with full rights, and we have every right to have decent work, decent wages, living wages, and also decent social protection in the world of care. So that is transition from voluntarism to decent work should be also one of the biggest agenda that the care economy has to take forward when we discuss. And the final thing is when we talk about migrant workers that we have been discussing all over when it comes to care economy, this is where the pathways of migration and care policies, it is very important, because it's not only the question, or it is not only the issues of micro level protection that we are proposing, but protection at a much higher level. Maybe it includes bilateral, multilateral, or different kinds of stakeholders who are involved in the process in providing like labor rights, human rights, and also issues of mobility. That is something that we have been talking about. That is one of the things that have been resulted in human trafficking all around the world. So right to mobility is again one of the important aspects when we bring issues of care and care economy in this society. So thank you for giving this opportunity to raise some of these very pertinent issues which are not otherwise discussed in the care discourse in common, and I hope these things will be carried out when it comes to discussions on policy and rights of caregivers and care receivers. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you so much. This has been a really productive discussion and session, very insightful input from different speakers. We have a few minutes where we would like also to hear from the people here, any burning questions, any inputs in the few minutes that we have. I think in the interest of time, since we have to exit the room in the next 5 minutes or so, and we also have to take a group picture for the panelists, I'm going to take 3 questions, and I would like it to be very brief, preferably less than 30 seconds, and just straight to the point. So I'm going to start with the lady at the back. Yes.
Thank you. My name is Rebecca Heuvelmans. I work for Women Engaged for a Common Future, an ecofeminist network organization. And for us as ecofeminists, the focus of the CSW on poverty and our discussion today on care work is very much linked to the triple planetary crisis that we're facing. And so we know that climate change is an inequality multiplier and increases the burden placed on women and girls in all their diversity when it comes to unpaid care work. For example, fetching water, right? One of these tasks that is often with this one particular group. But when it comes to global warming, these walls will be placed further. These women and girls will have to walk further, and in the meantime, they can't access education or paid work. And also when it comes to times of crisis, again, their specific needs are being forgotten, like menstrual health. And so I would really like to ask you 2 questions. So I would love to hear your perspectives on how the climate crisis is increasing the burden on women and girls and all that diversity when it comes to care work. And then also what do you believe is needed in terms of reform of the international financial architecture to make it work for women and girls in all that diversity who are disproportionately impacted and yet only receive a margin of the funding when it comes to their specific needs.
Thank you. I'm going to take 1 question from here and then 1 from here as well. So the 2 of you agree on which one wants to go first. Decide together.
My name is Alison Brown. I'm from the International Alliance of Women. I have heard a lot of good analysis, a good description of the situation. We have all the documents in place. We want to suggest looking at the tax system. I would like to hear exactly what is supposed to be changed on the tax system to free up money, because we know at some point somebody's ox is going to be gored. And this is what I had expected from a feminist group to say, this, and this is what we're going to have to change, instead of saying we're going to have to look at this and that. Because we have been looking at this for a really long time, And I want to close with one of my favorite posters. It said, wouldn't it be wonderful if every school got all the finances they need, but the Air Force had to have a bake sale to buy a bomber? Thank you.
All right, thank you so much. There was a hand here. Be very brief to the point. We have also time for response from the speakers.
Okay, so thank you very much. I think this session have really been inclusive. There have been a lot of perspective into the discussion on the care economy. So I just wanted to add that women and girls with disabilities are both caregivers and also recipients of care. And in most cases, women and girls with disabilities care are premised around the charity model where our dignity, our human rights, and respect are always curtailed. And for us to ensure an inclusive care and support agenda, there is the need for an investment into an inclusive care and agenda where disability-related costs are borne and taking care. For example, personal assistance. For example, as I'm here as a woman with visual impairment, without a personal assistant, I couldn't have participated in this conference. Then also the issue of assistive devices. Assistive devices, especially in African countries, are very expensive. So there is the need for us to remove taxations on them so that women and girls with disabilities could have assistive technology, assistive devices to obtain the autonomy that we so desire. Then there is the need to also institutionalize the care and support of caregivers of persons with disability. For example, I had 10 siblings, of which 5 of us were visually impaired. And 5 of them who were not visually impaired needed to drop out of school, stop work, and to provide personal assistance to us to the detriment of their development. So these are some of the intersectionalities that brings into the care agenda. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And very great insights that I think had also been not touched on. So I would like to ask any of the speakers if they want anything they want to respond to some of the questions that were asked. Very briefly, there was a question on tax. If any of the speakers wants to say, also if there's any of the speakers that wants to say anything very briefly as we're closing. Otherwise, we're going to head to the closure of this event. Anyone? Yeah.
I just wanted to respond to the first question on the relation between unpaid care work, climate change, and climate action, just transition. I mean, certainly the care economy needs to be put at the center of any discussion on climate change from a point of view of unpaid care work, but also from a point of view of paid care work. And it needs to be part of the planning of a new system whereby the care economy can also be a sector that can provide jobs in this transition that the economies will have to go through. So as well, we need to connect the dots and really look at climate change, paid and unpaid care work, and just transition together.
Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone. The plan is that we're going to collect all the recommendations from speakers, but also from the audience, and we'll have 1 to 2 page recommendations that we're going to be using in the different forums and spaces that have been shared here. The ones that UN Women has been shared. We ask for your support to continue amplifying the messages so that care and the caring economy can become a reality at some point. So thank you so much. I would like to ask the speakers to stay behind for a beautiful photo. Thank you, everyone, and good afternoon.